I prefer to be the kind of person who steps up and faces the challenge than the kind of person who stays below the line and avoids challenge. What kind of person do you want to be? What do you want? How badly do you want it? How much are you willing to suffer? Those three questions our high performers face every day.
It's Jordan Mulligan from the Mulligan Brothers, and today's interview is with Bill Beswick, one of the most highly decorated sports coaches in the UK, from coaching teams like Manchester United football team, England football team, England basketball team. He's coached Olympic gold medalists, and he takes a sports psychologist look. He's just released his new book. Before that, I just wanted to say a massive shout out to mulliganbrothers.com, the sponsor of the video, where you can now buy the Not a Journal from mulliganbrothers.com. It's linked down below. All of that helps support these projects. Before that, let's jump into this interview with Bill Beswick.
For people who don't know, just introduce yourself and what you do.
Well, my name is Bill Beswick. I'm an applied sports psychologist, which means that I work with athletes, teams and coaches to improve their performance by helping them overcome mental and emotional barriers to performance.
So I'd love to know what different sports have you worked in as well. Like, just give us a list. I know you said a lot earlier, but
many different sports, from equestrian to American football to basketball to netball to you name it. Because I've always believed that some of the performance issues that I deal with cross all sports and, of course, cross business and education as well. Because the human being, when called upon to perform something that's challenging, faces all the mental and emotional barriers that I was talking about before. So I think my work applies across all aspects of performance.
Lovely. I think we'll definitely touch on that as well a little bit later. But early days for yourself, we have a large American audience. How would you describe your childhood, the area that you grew up in?
Well, very working class, Manchester man, youngest of a family of 6, limited circumstances, but had 2 great breaks which changed my life. One was I passed the 11 plus from my primary school to go to grammar school. Grammar school brought me very much a middle class sort of upbringing. And the second one was at the age of 14, I joined the Manchester YMCA, which introduced me to a lot of people who'd been educated, experienced, and I learned so much from them. So I had a limited home environment, but a very much better environment outside the home.
And then, so early on, first sports, was you say basketball was one of your early things. Was that what you played with straight away, or was you into other sports?
Well, when I joined Manchester YMCA, they have 56 sports there over 6 floors. And I went as a 14-year-old, small, thin, with a plastic bag with some kit in, and walked around all 56 sports and nobody spoke to me. And I didn't know what to do, and I was in the gymnasium and there was basketball practice, and the Polish coach of the team came over to me and said, "Do you want to join in?" And those words have created my life. I can't think about how important those words are to me, and that's been my motto in life, to say that to other people as I've gone through life. Do you want to join in? And he kickstart, which was an amazing career.
Amazing. So did you start playing at a high level with basketball? Or?
I was very limited as a player, I'm afraid. I dreamed about playing at a high level. I loved the sport. I still love the sport. But it became clear to me that my physique wasn't matched for the game. So I made an early transition into coaching and found, to my delight, that I loved coaching.
Manchester basketball, I don't know if I've got this right, John Amachi, is that
yes,
Manchester?
Yes, John Amachi became an American superstar, or NBA and college star, yes.
I have an interesting story about John Amachi. When I was playing basketball early on, I sent him an email saying, really, I'm training to be in the NBA, can you offer any tips or help? And he sent me through this whole program to go over the summer, and I did it every single day. And I think, just like you said with that coach, is like those inclusive moments for people, like to reach out and help somebody else. What's your thoughts on children and especially young adults nowadays getting involved in a sport and maintaining that?
I think it's so important. I think it's so important. It's an activity which demands a level of commitment, a level of courage, focus, concentration, determination, resilience. And I think a lot of the present generation of young people have had life a little bit easy. They've been brought up in reasonably good circumstances by parents who really love them too much, done too much for them. And so they're not very resourceful as a generation. But you step into the world of sport and you've got to face up to some realities. And I think sport can help society by teaching children all those great qualities.
What are those lessons that you learn when you join in sport? And
well, the first thing is commitment. When you join a team, you're committed. And then the second thing is to get on with other people. You've got to move from me to we. You've got to stop being selfish and start being selfless. You've got to pass the ball to the person in the best position, or they will tell you you should pass the ball to the person in the best position. And then you've got to learn to have self-belief. And when you're playing in the arena, stepping up in the arena, you've got to take responsibility for your actions. You've got to have resilience when you get beaten or get dropped from the team. You've got to bounce back. So a lot of great human qualities which will help them throughout life are embedded in the learning of sport.
For yourself as a young athlete, was there any particular moments that you remember that taught you any lessons?
Oh, I think there was quite a few. I think the lesson of self-belief was a big one. I have each person has two selves, their real self and their performer self. And my real self is different from what you're hearing now. This is my performer self in action. My real self is quite shy, quite quiet, quite introverted. And that's what I first of all brought to the basketball court. And it didn't work. So I had to develop a performer self. I had to inject myself with confidence and assertiveness to go out and dictate and lead a team. And that was a big lesson to me, because when I became a teacher, which was my first job, I was able to walk into the classroom in my real self, Bill Beswick, quite quiet guy, but step up into my performer self and become Bill Beswick the teacher. Okay, children, this is what we're going to do today. So it was a great lesson to me that you can really be who you want to be.
What was that moment of transition from playing to coaching? What was the biggest attraction about getting into the coaching side of things?
Well, to be honest, it was determined by my fellow players. They decided I'd be better as a coach than a player. So, okay. But the transition for me was fairly easy. I think I've got a teacher type personality. I love to share. I love to share knowledge, to share information, see people do better. So I'm very much a people person. So coaching fitted my natural instincts, my normal personality. And of course there was nowhere I could go for advice at that time in this country. There was no coaching profession. So information from America was very limited at the time. So I had to really write my own script. But I loved it. I loved it. And the players responded really well. In fact, my first team, my very first team, still meets every year as a reunion. And that's lovely. That's about the good things in human beings.
What's the progression then from, so was it basketball initially with the coaching? Like, what was the progression through your career?
Well, basketball, and then, so my career was parallel. I had a career in education. So I went to college, trained to be a PE teacher, started teaching in Manchester, went from teaching to lecturing at college, and pursued a career in education as as a teacher and a professor and finally a president of a college. But I had this parallel career as a basketball coach who coached at club level and then got lucky enough to be asked to coach England. Had 5 exhilarating years with England, travelling the world, playing international basketball, and then finished because my 2 sons demanded my time to coach them. They were 10 and 12, and then came back into sport unexpectedly.
So this is something you probably wouldn't do naturally, but you have quite a long list of accolades in some of the sports you've been involved in, some of the teams you've been involved in. Could you go through some of them and some specific to some of the teams as well?
Well, basketball, we won the Commonwealth gold medal, which was the first medal that England had ever won at basketball. That was very good. Still talk to my captain every week. Football, started at Carlisle, lovely Carlisle, loved it, more sheep than people. Beautiful place, nice people. Went to Derby County, then Manchester United, then Middlesbrough as assistant manager, became the first non-football person to become assistant manager in the Premier League. Then to England, worked with the England team, and then on to FC20 in Holland. At the same time I was working with, I think I've worked with 9 national teams of different sports. So quite a journey.
What's for you like the thing that you latched onto the most, like in terms of your career, like that you enjoyed the most and you wanted to push and work towards?
I think initially it was wanting to be a good teacher, to help children and help students, and then it's become a fascination with sports psychology. I think it's so important because I see how much it helps people, and I've become fascinated with the process. And it's interesting, coaching and psychology are 2 of the things you can never master. You can never master them. Coaching evolves all the time, and psychology is so deep, so wide, that I feel as though I've only touched the surface. And there's so much more, which is why at my age I'm still working, because I'm actually interested in what I'm finding out.
How would you describe sports psychology to somebody who's never heard of it before?
Well, it's about maximising on yourself. It's about dealing with your own doubts, fears and anxieties, about letting the positive you defeat the negative you. Because really psychology is a battle of you versus you. We think the opposition's over there in the other dressing room, but actually it's in here. Who am I going to be today? Am I going to be my best self or my weaker self? So a lot of my psychology with teams and athletes and coaches comes down to fighter versus victim. We have a choice. There's a good story. Clint Eastwood was playing golf, and his partner, this last year, his partner said, "Clint, how old are you?" He said, 88. He said, 88 on Monday. And his partner said, "Wow, that's wonderful. What are you doing?" He said, "I'm starting a new movie." He said, "How do you do it?" He said, "I wake up every morning and don't let the old man in." And that's life. We wake up every morning and make a decision who we're going to be. I've got Parkinson's disease, so getting up in the morning is not so easy for me. Getting dressed is not so easy. I have to make a decision. Am I going to be a fighter today, or am I going to be a victim? And that's what fascinates me with sports psychology. And I suppose, in a nutshell, sports psychology is deciding whether you're going to be a fighter or a victim.
That's so applicable as well to everybody in life. Like you say, like yours isn't based on sports. So like in terms of other people waking up each morning and deciding, you know, how they're going to be, whether it's going to be a positive outlook or a negative outlook, is that something, can we take those lessons and apply them to our lives?
Absolutely. My latest book takes 20 lessons from sport, where I've dealt with somebody in sport some quite famous athletes, but they've got a mental and emotional problem getting in the way of their performance. And I explain how together we dealt with it, overcame it, and they went on to become what they were capable of. But then I draw it parallels to everybody. I mean, in a sense, we're all high performers. We all step up every day to earn a living, to maintain relationships, to take the responsibility of owning property, to raise children. We're all high performers. So the lessons of my high performers in sport carry across into life.
Is there anything in particular when you were seeing athletes that you would draw a commonality, like there was something in common with the athletes that was stopping them from performing, or issues that they were having?
I tend to ask athletes 3 questions when they come to see me, and I've had a lot of distinguished athletes come to see me over the years. And my 3 questions are, what do you want? How badly do you want it? And how much are you willing to suffer? And very often, everything revolves around the first question, what do you want? Because a lot of people are unclear what they want from life. They don't sit down and think through. We are writing our own life story every day, and yet we don't think about it. Who do we want to be? Where do we want to live? What life do we want to lead? When we've finished our life, come to the end of our life and look back, what do we want to say that we've done? So, what do you want is a very powerful question. And then, if an athlete says, I want to be the best, Bill, fine. How badly do you want it? Because you've got to pay a price to be the best. The best pay a big price. You've got to work harder, you've got to commit more, you've got to take more responsibility, you've got to deal with more ups and downs. And if we can deal with that question, how much are you willing to suffer? Because I work with gold medal champions, and they suffer every day. They work enormously hard. They sacrifice enormous things in order to get that success.
So we were speaking about this before, we've been following the 2 strongmen, the Stoltman brothers, and one of them just won World's Strongest Man, and one of them is trying to win World's Strongest Man this year. And the closer and closer he gets to it, the more of the price he's paying, the more pain he's going through, the more sacrifice. Is there a point where you, with your athletes that you worked with, that they took it too far? Is there a point where you have to tell them to stop, or what is the boundary, the line that can't be crossed?
The boundary or line revolves around physical and mental well-being. So I would be very careful not to take somebody to the state where they were injuring themselves mentally or physically, where obsession with a goal overcame common sense, understanding. So there are points where I'm also, part of my job is to be a truth teller. Many athletes are surrounded by people who don't tell them the truth, as indeed many people are. A good friend is somebody who tells you the truth. That helps you more. Part of my role is to tell athletes the truth, and one of those truths may be, I think you've got to face up to the fact you've not got the ability to go any further. You've run your race. Now relax, enjoy it. You did really well. You maxed out on what you were capable of doing.
So if they're not, as long as they're not pushing up against that and it's not creating a mental struggle, they're allowed to sort of extend themselves through pain. And I think you use the word obsession then. Obsession, I mean, you see it in athletes all the time. That's okay to have an obsession with a goal.
Obsession's a difficult word for me because I think a focus on a goal is a better word. It's more controlled, more legitimate. So I think obsession means you lose control of the process. Focus is you're more in control of the process. As long as I feel the athlete's in control of what they're trying to achieve, I'm fairly happy with that. It's when they start to lose control and they lose their reason why, because Very often an athlete continues into the pain barrier because of the people around them. They don't want to let people down. They themselves would be comfortable stepping out and saying, that's it, I've done enough. But they persist because of the pressure of their support group.
Obviously, you've worked with a lot of athletes. What is, when you say about pay the price, the pain that they go through, how does that look for somebody like a gold medal winner?
It looks like an everyday commitment where you wake up every day and say, just like Clint Eastwood, you say, today I'm going to be a champion. I work with Adam Peaty, the gold medal swimmer, and he arrives at the swimming pool at 6 o'clock in the morning. And before he goes in, he stops and says, today I will train like a champion. And he trains for 2 hours like a champion. Nobody in the pool can get near him. He works so hard. And he comes back again at 6 o'clock in the evening, and he stops outside the arena and says, tonight I'm going to train like a champion. And he trains like a champion. I gave a talk some years ago when Adam was a bit younger about attitudes to training. And I said, there's various types of attitudes to training. There's the just turn up, so that you get athletes who just turn up. It's training tonight, I'll just turn up. You get athletes who turn up to compete, or turn up to train, turn up to train. They'll turn up, they'll do the requisite amount of work, but that's it. Athletes who turn up to compete, they put a bit more effort in, they try to be the best amongst their group. Then there's the athletes who train to win. They train every day, every session, so that they win on match night. And then, I remember saying to Adam's group, there are just those very few players who train to dominate. They train so hard that winning is inevitable on race night. And Adam said, that clicked with me. I decided I was going to train to dominate. So he said, when I go into the Olympic final, I know I'm going to win. I know I've done more than anybody else. I feel so good.
That's given me goosebumps, that has. That's amazing. So I think as well as a non-athlete, a non-professional athlete, we see the athletes and we think a lot of the psychology is based around game day, it's race day, whatever it is. So how much is based on the consistency of showing up 360 days a year, whatever it is, and having the right psychology in those moments?
Everything. Race day should be inevitable. Winning should be inevitable. That's the price that athletes pay. Race day is fun because there's a crowd, there's cameras, there's your family, your friends, and it's nice to do that. What they don't see, the people in the arena don't see, is you on your own at 6 o'clock in the morning, working out, sweating, struggling. And that's what makes champions, the ability to motivate themselves to do the work on their own that leads to success in the arena.
What builds an athlete up? So we've got the training aspect of it, but there's so many more like meticulous little bits. Like, in your experience, what goes into creating an athlete, including like diet, sleep, like all these things that they're thinking about?
Well, there are 4 main elements. There's the physical element. You've got to take care of your strength, speed, stamina, nutrition, sleep, health. There's the technical element. Each activity has a skill base, so you've got to develop the skills. So for Adam Peaty, it would be skills, swimming stroke, turning, diving in, turning. And then you've got to develop the tactical intelligence to compete, follow a plan, know your position on the field, know how you relate to the members of the team, know how to deal with certain situations in the game, 1-0 up or 1-0 down. And then there's the mental element. That's building the confidence and belief that you are a champion, that you can do this. So it's that that change from being in the dressing room, the comfort zone, to being in the tunnel before a big game, breathing in, to going on the field and believing and having the confidence to do what you do well.
Okay, so let's take a step back. How did you get into the football? What was the pull to switch sports to football?
Well, it was by accident, really. I'd finished coaching England, and I'd had this really growing interest in sports psychology, but I was a principal of a college, and we hired some of our facilities to the Football Association for coaching courses, and a chap called Mick Wadsworth came along, and some or other we finished up having a cup of tea together, and we got talking, and he became fascinated. And when he held a course in the summer at Lillishall for 200 youth coaches, he invited me to speak to them what they could learn about what sports psychology you could do for football. And that was it, really, because in the audience was Steve McLaren, a young under-17 coach for Oxford United, and he went on to become a famous coach, and I went on his journey with him. I went with Mick to Carlisle first, and then with Steve McLaren on the journey to Derby, Man United, England, Middlesbrough, FC20. So it sort of happened. It's one of those nice things in life where I'd reached the age where I wasn't looking for anything. I thought I had a pretty good career and I was fine, but I had this interest, and I quite liked sharing it. And I met some good people who allowed me the opportunity to share it with football players, and actually they took to it quite well.
In a general sense, in sports, just across the board, is sports psychology still overlooked, or is it becoming like more of a thing at the moment?
It is. It's on its way. It's going to be very big. I think there's a generation of coaches that are going through that don't know a lot about it and perhaps a little bit intimidated by it. The word psychology can be frightening. But there's a young generation of coaches coming along who are far more familiar with it and far less threatened, and they will involve. I mean, it's hard now to think of somebody, a superstar athlete, who wouldn't have a sports psychologist on their support staff, because the stresses and strains that they're putting. I'm thinking about young Miss Raducanu, who's just won the American Open tennis at 18. The world has changed for her with one victory. The media can't get enough of her. The commercial opportunities. She's won one tournament. She's 19 now, I think. She needs help. I mean, she's a very, very sensible girl, a very intelligent girl, but I still think she would benefit from having a sports psychologist on her team.
So have you seen young athletes like that go through that kind of burst onto the scene? Like, if you have, what kind of work do you have to do for them, and what are the kind of things that they will face along, like in those moments?
Well, I think it's very difficult for a young athlete suddenly to get a multi-million-pound contract or become a celebrity, because it affects them, and it affects the people around them. The people around them change, because they've suddenly, instead of this being friends with this kid who's good at sport, they're friends with this superstar who's rich, can introduce them to things, can do things. And it becomes a very heady mixture. I remember talking to David Beckham at Man United about being an ordinary person with an extraordinary talent. So I would say to him, David, you're an ordinary person with an extraordinary talent. You have got an extraordinary talent. He was a lovely player, lovely man, by the way, a lovely player. But you're an ordinary person. When you go out this training ground, make sure you stop at those red lights. You're not that extraordinary, you can go through red lights. So it's about keeping balance. What do you want? Do you want to be a celebrity? Or do you want to be the best player you can be? If you want to be the best player you can be, forget that. Concentrate on your training.
So with someone like David, like, what was the process of work? Like, how much was based on performance and how much is based on the outside world? Because I mean, someone like him, like it's this constant thing. He steps outside and he's surrounded by paparazzi and fans and stuff. Like, how much work's based on each thing?
Well, the work is based on his sporting performance. The outside thing only gets included when it affects his sporting performance. So he was actually very good at dealing with it, because he was one who evolved dramatically quickly because of his wife. But he was good at dealing with it. But you learn to see the signs of change. So, for example, I remember being at FC20 and we had an 18-year-old boy who was very good. And he was a humble boy, a nice boy. He used to come in to the training ground in an old beat-up Volkswagen, which was rather nice. And he got his first contract, which was, I think, €1 million or something like that. And the next day he came up in the biggest, shiniest car you've ever seen. And that triggered my thinking, oh my goodness me, there's going to be a problem. And he was out of the game in 2 years.
Wow. So can that be a thing, too much too soon for these young athletes?
It is, unless they get good advice. It's still the best thing that an athlete can have is 2 good parents.
So if you were to try to convince a coach or even an athlete to take up sports psychology, how would you explain it to them?
Well, I would explain it to them by demonstrating the power of the mindset on performance. Because if I say to a coach, is it your aim to create excellent football players or rugby players or basketball players or whatever the coach is coaching? And they say yes. So I said, just describe to me, give me words that describe an excellent player in your sport. And they'd give me a page of words, and I'd say, let me just do something, and I'd circle the words, leave some uncircled, circle the words. And I said, what's the difference between the two? And one, the circled words would be dominate the page, and they said the circled words are all mental, attitude. I'd say, there you go. So if you describe Cristiano Ronaldo, you finish up with the page of mental attributes, courage to perform, whatever. So that's the way I convince them. So how much do you teach the 3 words that are not mental, and how much do you teach the mental? Well, we don't teach the mental. There you go.
Wow. So yeah, I mean, if I was to think just then when you said about an athlete, most of them would be mental.
Yeah.
Yet when someone like myself or a normal person thinks of an athlete, we think training in the gym, practicing reps, whatever it is. But that's just such a small percentage. It's so interesting. And we were saying before this, we was interviewing a sports psychologist recently. It just blows my mind. And it's just interesting to see athletes starting to work with them. You know, in the Olympics and the Olympic athletes, would you say that 99% of those guys are working with sports psychologists?
Not 99%, but a lot more. A lot more. I've worked with British swimming now for the last 8 years, since London, which was a very disappointing Olympics. I was brought in immediately after London to create a winning environment, to change the environment. And we went to Rio and had the most successful one, and then we went to Tokyo and had an even more successful one. And I think that some sports are now far more familiar with sports psychologists, and they've got them embedded in the system.
One of the things that this was on the website, your own website, was the word psychology. We just spoke about this, can be off-putting for people. So you like to use the word stretch and stretching performance. Like, what do you mean when you say stretching performance? Well,
Psychology for many people means shrink. And that's an unfortunate connection that I found when the newspapers first got some understanding of what I was doing. So my first headline in the newspaper was "Shrink Talks to Football Players." So I don't see myself as a shrink at all. I see myself as a stretch, because I'm only focused in their performance. What can I do to help you perform better? So I might stretch it 1 or 2%, which at the highest level is quite significant. I actually think it probably is more than that, but you never know. You can't tell. You can't measure it, can you?
Well, that's something that I was going to go on to next, is that extra 1 to 2%. It is an extra 1 or 2%, but how much more, how important is that extra little bit?
Ooh, it can be everything. It can be everything. But I think what it is an extra 1 or 2% on the surface, but underneath, what happens when a sports psychologist works with an athlete is we change the way they think. We give them another language, so that when they're faced with something, when they're not with us, they have something to go to, a sort of language like fighter or victim. So many athletes who I've worked with in the past, who see me now and lovely in the chat, say, I find myself just in life dealing with the kids or whatever at home, and I'm going, am I a fighter or a victim? So it actually creates a framework for thinking more positively about life.
How applicable is it to people like entrepreneurs, business owners, all these people in education, the work that you're doing with athletes?
Very applicable, because as I said before, we're all high performers, and some of those people have got very high performance jobs, and some of them are entering I work in the challenge industry. There are a body of people in this country who avoid challenge, stay below the line, don't take any responsibility, work for somebody else, live in somebody else's property. And they don't risk the challenge, but the people I work with step over the line every day and face challenge. They can fail, they can be embarrassed, they can get hurt. So that challenge industry extends across business, education and sport and life. And so I work with people who face many negatives, and I help them reframe those negatives into possible positives. So I think, I've often thought, we're talking now about the National Health Service being burned out. I think they need coaches in hospital. Coaches who look at the people, not just look at the systems. Everybody in hospital is concerned with systems, making patients better. But who looks after the people who are doing that? A coach coming into a business would look after the people in the business. That could make a massive impact on the business.
If you're enjoying the video, guys, please consider going to mulliganbrothers.com, where you can now buy the Not a Journal and the Inspire Change t-shirts. Let's hop back into the interview.
You're just talking about a certain type of person who takes that step over the line every day. Something that I feel like we've noticed a lot with some of the people who watch our videos and some of the people who have struggled to succeed is the fear of failing is so immobilizing that they won't even try. They'd prefer not to try and find out. I mean, is that something that you've seen? And if it is, how do people deal with that?
I think that's very common. I think that when faced by challenge, the mind skips into the future and says, what if I fail? What if I'm embarrassed? What if I get injured? What if I... And I have to give them a different way of thinking. And the thinking is, I may fail. I may get embarrassed. I may get injured. But I can deal with it because I'm strong. And because I prefer to be the kind of person who steps up and faces the challenge than the kind of person who stays below the line and avoids challenge. What kind of person do you want to be? What do you want? How badly do you want it? How much are you willing to suffer? Those three questions our high performers face every day.
One of the things I think, again, with athletes is that it's like they're this special type of person. I'd be interested to find out if that's the case. Like, you are born a certain way, your brain ticks in a certain way, so you can become a high achiever, even in other realms. Is that the case that takes a special type of person, or can everybody step into high achievement and pushing it to different, like pushing the boundaries of different places?
There's a great phrase: genetics deals the cards, environment plays the hand. So genetics and your background does influence your disposition to success in various activities. But environment, the opportunity, I talked about my environment in Manchester MCA. Do you want to join in? That was a major, major influence on my life, those 5 words. So environment does give opportunities to people to maximise on themselves. I'm a great believer in that anybody can change at any stage of their life. We are writing our own story, our own life story, but there's no reason why we can't stop, have a mental time out and go, what do I really want? And start from that moment on rewriting your story by facing the challenge, achieving for yourself, and putting your fears and anxieties to one side. So I would never give up on somebody, never.
How do those type of people, I think, because the automatic response I see on some of our videos, because we do a lot of videos with elite athletes and high achievers, is, well, it's all right for them. You know, it's okay for them. This is the comments we'll get. It's okay for them. He's got decent genetics, or it's all right for him. He's from an affluent background, or it's all right for. There's always something that, you know, they have that I don't have, and that's why I haven't got it. How would you initially work with somebody to like flip that mindset around?
Another great thing I wrote once was, there's 1,000 excuses, but not a single reason. I did that with Bristol Bears rugby last season. They loved it. When you step into the challenge zone, the number of excuses for getting out, back into your comfort zone from there, multiplies. I'm too tired. It's too difficult. I'm having a bad day. Nobody likes me. And so I would teach them to face up to those excuses and refuse to be a victim, and teach them a fighter mentality about all those things may be there, but I'm still going to do it. I'm going to deal with it. So 1,000 excuses, but not one reason not to achieve. And even if you don't achieve at the highest level, you may not have the same genetic disposition as somebody else. But there's an awful lot of players playing in the Premier League football in this country who are B for talent, not quite as genetically superior, but A for attitude. And attitude is something anybody can have, anybody. Talent is something that may be a little bit God-given, but attitude is anybody's. You can decide to improve your attitude any day.
Okay, so just to emphasise on that point, because I think that is really important to this, is if you've got that predisposition to have a negative mindset and a defeatist mindset, you can switch it around to have the positive attitude that could take you, if you're a young person, to becoming a high achiever in sports or high achiever in business.
You're in control. You're in control of your mind. It's your mind. So you decide what you think.
We're not stuck with the mindset we've got.
No, it's the mindset that's with us for certain reasons. We've got to change those reasons. We've got to decide we want something different, and then we can develop a fresh mindset.
If you was looking at an athlete, I know there's so much that goes into the psychology, but how would you have them work on themselves to start off with? Like, what's the first few things they'd start to look at?
What do you want? How badly do you want it? How much are you willing to suffer?
With the what do you want, is there any exercises they can do, like write down goals? Is there anything that you recommend personally?
There's an exercise in my latest book which says, who am I? And it is a written exercise. You write down, I mean, it starts with a dream. If you don't have the dream, then you're not really going to go anywhere. But you have a dream, and then I have to help them translate the dream into commitment, and then translate the commitment into belief, into action, into challenge, into resilience, into fighter mentality. So it's a process, but there are many exercises, but they're all the same. They're reframing your thinking from negative to positive. They're all saying, I remember doing an exercise with the England women's soccer team, and they were guilty of negative self-talk. They talked themselves down. So I gave them an exercise where I would give them a negative and they would have to shout out a positive. We're not good enough. We're great. And the best one was, we're never going to win today. And the answer came out, we're going to win because we're the meanest bitches on this field today. And I just cheered and clapped them.
Oh, well, that is a powerful piece, right? When we're talking about dreams, I think for me, there's like, I think when you say the word dreams, it's like not a negative view on it, because I have loads of dreams. But I think when I speak into a sports psychologist, it's like, is it all right to use the word dreams? Is it okay to have dreams? Like, is that important to have a dream?
Absolutely, absolutely. Young children have dreams, and I aspired to be a great basketball player. When I came into basketball, I was going to be Michael Jordan of England. Didn't turn out that way, but maturity is about understanding that dreams cannot always be fulfilled, but the exercise of committing to them and trying for them has been excellent. It's been worthwhile ways of life. And then you divert your dream. I diverted my dream from being the best Michael Jordan to being the best Phil Jackson, the best coach, basketball coach. So I love dreams. It's just about interpreting dreams into reality.
Yeah, I think that's where the negative connotations come from. Is like it's not having the material like putting structure around them, making them into something that is actually achievable. It's like just left up there to not have anything to target towards.
When I speak to children in the high school, local high schools, which I do, I'm happy to do community work. When I speak to them, I say, how many of you are dreaming of passing your A-levels to go to university? Well, let me tell you this. It's a great dream. I love it. Well done. But the only way you can fulfill that dream is what you do today. You can't just hope it's going to happen. You've got to make it happen. So you have a dream, in 3 months' time you're going to pass your examinations for university. So what you have to do, because you have to be excellent on that day, you have to be excellent today. You have to study hard today. And then you have to study hard tomorrow. And then you have to study hard the next day. And you know what? That dream is coming to you. You're not chasing it. It's coming to you. And if you're excellent every day, I guarantee you'll be excellent on examination day. And you've achieved your dream.
I think a scary thing for some people about dreams is, because I was the same, I was going to play in the NBA. And I wholeheartedly believe that's what I was training for every single day. And I failed. Didn't make it. I'm here. But it's worked out for the best. And it's like, looking back, I can see how those paths happened. How do you convince somebody to work towards goals without that promise of success, and to also not convince them, but to let them know that it will lead you to where you need to be anyway?
I've just spoken to a coach for an American girls soccer team today, and they've been beaten in the playoffs, and she's upset. Is the best word I can say, devastated. But I explained to her that in the national championships, all but one team journey will end in defeat. It's okay if it ends in defeat. It's not as nice as winning, but it's okay, because what you understand is It's the process, not the outcome. It's the process of sport that makes it so meaningful and valuable in life. It's the things you learn on the journey that are the key things in your life that help you be a better husband, father, friend, granddad. Some people will go all the way and win. And fantastic. Brilliant. But many people, 90% of people in the challenge zone, will only go part way. But it's still rewarding because it's the process that gives you the benefits. The outcome is just cake on the end of the meal.
With some of the athletes that you've seen who didn't make it all the way, they had lessons learned for sure. Like in that whole process of trying to become a professional athlete, you're going to learn lessons. Is it always the case that those lessons are taken away, that knowledge is taken away, or does it sometimes slip out from these people?
No, I think from my experience and the feedback that former clients have given me, the way of thinking when we're working on them as an athlete becomes integrated in their way of thinking as a person. So I think that the introduction of sports psychology to an athlete, you can't just deal with the athlete, you're dealing with the person as well. And there's a crossover. If I teach the athlete how to avoid victim mentality, how to slip into fighter, how to transfer to fighter mentality, they're going to have that in life. When I got diagnosed with Parkinson's disease, I was driving back from the hospital with my wife, and she rang my second son, Philip, in London, and said, "Philip, your dad's got Parkinson's. He's gone into victim mentality." And I heard this booming laugh at the other end of the phone, and he said, "I'll ring back in 10 minutes." And he rang back, and he and his wife, Hayley, had Googled Parkinson's, researched it, and said, "Dad, we'll be up this week." It was Thursday, and he said, "We'll be up this weekend with the boys. We're going to have a family action plan meeting on handling Parkinson's." And I was straight back into fighter mentality. So there's a very big crossover between situations in sport and situations in life.
I'm just going to go through some of these chapters, what I can see here, the lessons. Okay, well this one's interesting straight away. I'm probably going to say that for each lesson. But taking responsibility, what's the importance of that? Lesson 1.
Well, I've talked a little bit about crossing the line, leaving your comfort zone of letting everybody take decisions for you and then beginning to take decisions for yourself, facing up to the challenge of life and sport. And everything begins with taking responsibility. If you take responsibility, the number of excuses diminishes because it's your responsibility. If you don't take responsibility, it's always somebody else's fault. You've always got a way out of the issue. And I've dealt with teams who didn't take responsibility. It was always his fault. So you'd say, what happened on that? He did it. And that's the death of a team. So you're looking for people who go, okay, it happened, I will deal with it. I will learn from it, I will move on. So taking responsibility is the start of controlling your mindset and your life's journey.
I guess that's why we start with it on lesson 1. I'm not going to do all of them because I do genuinely believe it would be better for us to promote doing the book. Is it on Audible, by the way?
Yes.
The book. Okay, fantastic. That's brilliant. We can link that all through as well. Lesson 4 though is set no limits and believe in yourself.
Many people suffer from. I did from my upbringing. My upbringing on a rather poor estate placed me in a certain place in life and gave me certain inhibitions about who I could be and who I couldn't be. But going to grammar school and going to the YMCA raised my limits because I met other people who'd done other things and they felt I could. They became supporters, my cheerleaders. And so I became the first person in my family to go to university. So I think one of the things sports psychology does is find out if an athlete's got self-imposed limits and find out why are you limiting yourself to that level of achievement. You could do much better than that. So we're breaking through barriers.
It's really interesting because that really closely matches up with a motivational speaker who we used to speak to, was friends of ours, called Inky Johnson. He was an American football player, and he had a life-changing injury where he lost the use of his right arm, and it was just before he was drafted for the NFL. He was like one of the draft picks for the NFL, and his is exposure and belief. And I think similar situation, was from a poor background, and his coach had taken him out into the world, places, and he'd seen steak dinner for the first time, and that gave him that exposure to the world and what was actually capable, like these levels that are above where he was. How important is it to get out of our surroundings? And like for you, grammar school was obviously a big one, like to try and get that exposure.
It's absolutely essential, because you don't know what you don't know. And you can restrict yourself in life because you don't know there's another kind of life, there's other options available. One of the things that has changed about that from my time is that television and film bring in the world to your front room. So kids in a slum area, a poor area, can actually see there is another way of life. And I think that's one of the reasons we have so much issues with immigration now, because those poor people are looking on the television and saying, wow, look how these people live. I would like to live like that, which is quite understandable, and making tremendous efforts to achieve that.
That's a very interesting point. I think TV, YouTube now, like people are sharing their lives like this, which I think is a great tool for people to go, oh, fantastic. This is capable for me. Fantastic tool. I'll leave that one out. That's a lovely one. Stay positive, be your own cheerleader. Raising your bottom line. That's a really interesting point. Raise your bottom line. Aim for mastery, not perfection.
Yes, that came from interviewing an international player who was beset by anxiety, and I did an exercise with him. He was very inconsistent, brilliant athlete, brilliant, but could dip alarmingly and quickly. And I discovered that he was dominated by fear of mistakes. So we did an exercise where I set a top line and said, "What out of 100%, what's your best ever performance? Best ever?" He said 95%. So 95%. I said, "Give me another percentage for your worst ever performance." And he put down 60%. So 60% to 95%. I said, that's alarming. That's alarming. What is an acceptable level for trust, winning the trust of your coaches and fellow players? And he said, it has to be 85%, Bill. So we put 85% in. So I said, instead of worrying about being the best you can be every game, let's focus on making that 85%, becoming more consistent, becoming more solid. That would involve forgiving yourself for mistakes on the field and staying in the game, staying consistent. And that affected his performance enormously, because in order to achieve the 85%, which he had to check in with me about at the end of every game, instead of fluctuating because he was consumed with mistakes, he began to think more about consistency and making that bottom line, raising, his bottom line was raised. And he's had a very successful career.
I don't know, you must get extreme satisfaction when something clicks with athletes. Like, you know, for him, that would have been like an aha moment, and he's coming away with it. I mean, what does that mean to you when you figure that person's psychology out? Well,
it's quite difficult actually, because I deal with intangibles, the non-measurable. So it's very hard for me to say, I really helped that kid. But I get an instinctive feeling that maybe I did help. So I think it's hard for me to say out loud publicly that I really influenced that athlete's career, because they're intangibles: belief, confidence, issues like raising your bottom line. But I think I instinctively know I did offer some help.
What is the goal for you as a psychologist? Like, when we're talking on a one-to-one, is that the goal to get those moments?
The goal is to make better athletes and better people. And I think that's the whole goal. We're there to make better athletes, the 1 or 2% we talked about, and better people that are more able to write their own story in a better, more positive, productive way.
I wasn't going to do this one, but we will. And then I think I'll just pick a couple off the back. But this one, I feel, is something that some people forget quite often, is success is a series of small steps.
Yes. The story behind that was, I was in my office in Derby County, and the manager, the fearsome Jim Smith, fierce man, brought in this rather sheepish looking 19-year-old and said, "Bill, you've got 21 days to turn this kid round, otherwise I'm getting rid of him." And left this young lad with me. And I realised that he was a good lad. He was a very talented player, but his attitude was appalling. But he came from a background where he'd never been taught any behavioural characteristics. So he didn't know what he didn't know. So what I did was, I decided it'd be too much for him to try and change him at once. So I decided we'd do one thing a day. So I said, tomorrow, they had to report for 10:30, he used to come in at 10:29 every day. So I said, tomorrow you'll be in at 9:30. 9:30, Bill? I said, well, if you're not, I'm going to pass you back to the manager. So he was in at 9:30. And then he came to see me in the afternoon and said, right, tomorrow you come in at 9:30, you're going to have your hair cut. He had long hair. I said, looked like an athlete, looked like a professional. So he came in at 9:30 the next day with a very smart haircut. The next day you're going to come in at 9:30 with your hair smart, and you're going to dress smart. You're going to dress like you're a professional. I don't know how to dress. Have a word with Stefano Aranio, our Italian, magnificent man. Beautiful dresser. So he went to see Stefano. Stefano took him out shopping. Came in the next day, looked like a king. The next day he had to go, when he came in, he had to go to see everybody and shake hands with them and wish them good morning, look them in the eye. The next day he was first on the training field. The next day he was last on, and it were all done. So at the end of 21 days, he was a different person, because what he found was all those little changes affected the way people saw him.
Absolutely amazing. All these chapters we could, I think we'll just cover this one because we spoke about it. Refuse to be a victim, develop resilience from setbacks.
When you try to achieve something in life, it's inevitable there will be setbacks. If it was easy, everybody would do it. So it's tough. It's tough rising to the top of your career. It's tough holding a relationship together. It's tough buying a house. It's tough being a champion. So there will be setbacks. So we need a process for dealing with setbacks. And we have to develop the resilience to handle that situation. There's a great story of Kobe Bryant, the basketball player. In his first year as a professional, his team reached the playoffs, and he was the superstar, the young superstar. And in the last minute of the game, he had 3 shots to win the game for his team and missed all 3. And at the end of the game, the commentators were astounded. This great talent missed all 3 shots. And he was sat down on the bench, and his head was in his hands. And they were talking about how he must feel dreadful. And when he got up to come off the court, they managed to get an interview with him and said, Kobe, you were sat on the bench with your head in your hands, you must have felt terrible. And he looked at them and he said, what's feeling got to do with it? I was working out why I missed those shots. I now know why I miss those shots and I can do something about it. And that's a great coping strategy when you have a setback. Setbacks knock you emotionally off balance. But you've got to work beyond the emotion to get to, why did I have that setback? What can I learn from it? How am I going to avoid it in the future? And go on.
I love that. That's an amazing story. So, just whilst we're just on that, there's some athletes that are absolutely fascinating. Kobe is one of them, like the way he would turn up before a game and shoot for hours and hours on end. And sometimes after a game he'd shoot for hours and hours on end. What is that like? Are they like, is that just the psychology is on another level? Like how are they doing 5 or 6 times more than other athletes? Like what's going through them as in their head and the processes?
I think some of it's love. They love what they're doing. They love being there. It's the place where they feel at home. And the second thing is that for some athletes, that's what gives them confidence to go on the court and face the crowd and the challenge. That preparation is the key to confidence. If you are in the tunnel at Manchester United, many of the players used to tell me, if you've done a good week's work in preparation for the game, you feel ready to play. If you've had a poor week's work, you feel less ready. And that can be vital in terms of confidence to face the challenge.
I mean, yeah, I just am shocked by some of the this is that, I mean, we're talking about professionals, but the levels of it, even in professional sports, there's a wide gap as well. What does it take to be the best of the best, the LeBron James, Michael Jordans, Cristiano Ronaldo's? What does it take to be at the pinnacle?
Well, you've got to be A-grade talent, a really A-grade talent. These are exceptional physical specimens, technical specimens. And you've got to be A-grade attitude. And they're the gods. I've been through a long career, I've probably dealt with 4 of them. And these are the gods. These are people who have enormous talent at their disposal, but the attitude to work every day, to commit to the sacrifice of being the best.
Going to be a really interesting one then. So you've worked with 4 or 5. How many had all the ability and the skill, but didn't have the ability? How many people, the attitude, sorry, how many was it they could have been the gods and up there, but they just didn't have the attitude for it?
Oh, I've come across plenty. I mean, they're the tragedies of sport. You see them on the field, on the basketball court, and they're brimming with talent, brimming with it, and you think, my goodness, how good this kid is. But they don't have the attitude. So they consistently let you down. Sometimes don't turn up. Sometimes leave the fight halfway through. I'm having a bad day. Whereas your athlete with lesser talent, B plus, but massive attitude, will survive that and go on. And they're the ones it's a pleasure to work with. They're the ones, the world is full of those professional athletes who've not quite as big as they should be, strong as they should be, quick as they could be. But you love them for their attitude. Fighter mentality through and through. Never let you down. Battle to the end. They're the ones who win.
Which ones are the more powerful of the two? Attitude or?
Well, it's interesting. You can win with less talent, but you can't win with less attitude. So resolve that for yourself.
This is something that everybody at Mulligan Brothers has started doing recently, and that is keeping a journal. So keep a journal, release your fears and move on. So what does that mean to you?
Well, sometimes it's difficult to come to terms with the raging emotions in your head, your doubts, fears and anxieties. And so one of the techniques I use is to get those out onto the page. And it's quite relieving, actually, to sometimes get them out of your head, clear your head, by writing them down on the page. And then on the opposite page, I say, once you've written them down, write down what you could do about them tomorrow, how you could help yourself tomorrow. And then we keep doing that, and gradually they're developing the coping skills of dealing with them. So they're recognizing their own traumas, but they're also recognizing, by focusing on this, I actually got rid of that. So they're recognizing coping strategies. So I think keeping a journal is a very good way of taking your innermost turbulent emotions out of your head where it's damaging, and putting it on a piece of paper and making it an objective exercise, making it a rational exercise rather than an emotional exercise, and then beginning to read and see every day what's happening to you, and beginning to find ways round that, coping strategies for. And it's interesting, when you start with a player who's in trouble, the page on the left goes shorter and shorter and shorter and that's a nice sign.
I love it. I think practically we've been using journals quite a lot recently. It's something that we're trying to get into more of, and for me it's helped loads. Just writing it out, it feels like I'm getting more solid thoughts as well, and I'm becoming more aligned with it. That was fantastic. What I usually do at the end is, to make sure that I've covered everything, is ask Luke.
Yeah, I was going to ask like one question, but kind of covered it, which is, you talk about attitude and talent. Like, can attitude be enough without the talent?
No. Well, it can take you so far, but you have to have some capacity to perform in the arena. You can't just win with attitude. It will take you so far, but in the end, you need enough talent to allow you to perform the skills necessary for the game.
Is there anywhere where people can find you, or the best place to find you if they're trying to find your work and stuff?
Well, if they Google, there's quite a bit on there. They can just put Bill Beswick in and they can track down a number of things I've done. There's the website, I'm around, so people will find me if they want to. I've generally found that to be the basis.
Lovely. And everything from today that we've spoken about is going to be linked down below. And the book is also available on Audible, which we seem to have fantastic success with the people who watch the videos.
Yes.
They love to use Audible, so we'll link the Audible link down below as well. Is it really?
Yeah.
Oh, that's amazing.
It was the hardest 2 days I've ever done. I went to a studio in Manchester and locked in a little studio. The producer was outside, nice young man. And I had to read it, but I had to read it word for word. Whereas normally I like to expand or illustrate or whatever. And so I read the introduction, and then he said, hang on. And he was waiting, and he said, that's fine, Bill, we'll go with that. So I said, what do you mean we? He said, all this going directly to Penguin in London. There's 6 people sat round a table who are checking for the veracity of the audio. And so it was 2 days' work, hard work with my voice. But what I really felt was that I needed it to be authentic. I didn't want an actor reading it. I wanted it to be me, because that book is my life. So people say, a lot of my old athletes say, Bill, it's you talk, I can hear you. So anyway, it's worked. Lovely. So the audio is quite successful.
I'm going to download that as well. Sometimes I can read a hard copy, but we'll like I say, linked all down below. Thank you so much for your time. Honestly, it's so appreciated, and really excited to share this with everyone.
And there you go. I hope you made it this far, because the knowledge and wisdom that Bill has is worth listening to. So often I think we're looking for shortcuts and short piece of information that can help us get to somewhere. And sometimes that's not the case. It requires a large body of information. And Bill has it all. And his website, his book is all linked down below. I recommend go following him, go buying the book, all that kind of stuff. Also, there's a main piece on mulliganbrothers.com that's a more condensed version. And also, today's video was sponsored by mulliganbrothers.com, where you can buy the Not a Journal, the Inspire Change t-shirts. There's a link in the description to mulliganbrothers.com. And that basically helps us take our film crew, take myself, be able to go interview Bill and create these projects with our team of editors. And yeah, thank you so much for all the support we've been having so far. It has been amazing. Go follow me on Instagram at Jordan Mulligan Brother, where you can see what I get up to on a day-to-day basis. Guys, thank you for watching. Go share the message. Have a blessed and productive day, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.